Nelson Mandela was the first black president of South Africa, elected after time in prison for his anti-apartheid work. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. Who was Nelson Mandela? Nelson Mandela was a social rights activist, politician and philanthropist who became South Africa's first black president from 1994 to 1999. After becoming involved in the anti-apartheid movement in his 20s, Mandela joined the African National Congress in 1942. For 20 years, he directed a campaign of peaceful, nonviolent defiance against the South African government and its racist policies. Beginning in 1962, Mandela spent 27 years in prison for political offenses. In 1993, Mandela and South African President F.W. de Klerk were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts to dismantle the country's apartheid system. For generations to come, Mandela will be a source of inspiration for civil rights activists worldwide. Early life. Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in the tiny village of Mvezo, on the banks of the Mbash River in Transkei, South Africa. His birth name was Rolihlahla Mandela. Rolihlahla in the Xhosa language literally means pulling the branch of a tree, but more commonly translates as troublemaker. Mandela's father, who was destined to be a chief, served as a counselor to tribal chiefs for several years but lost both his title and fortune over a dispute with the local colonial magistrate. Mandela was only an infant at the time, and his father's loss of status forced his mother to move the family to Kunu, an even smaller village north of Mvezo. The village was nestled in a narrow grassy valley. There were no roads, only footpaths that linked the pastures where livestock grazed. The family lived in huts and ate a local harvest of maize, sorghum, pumpkin and beans, which was all they could afford. Water came from springs and streams, and cooking was done outdoors. Mandela played the games of young boys, acting out male rite of passage scenarios with toys he made from the natural materials available, including tree branches and clay. Education. At the suggestion of one of his father's friends, Mandela was baptized in the Methodist Church. He went on to become the first in his family to attend school. As was custom at the time, and probably due to the bias of the British educational system in South Africa, Mandela's teacher told him that his new first name would be Nelson. When Mandela was 12 years old, his father died of lung disease, causing his life to change dramatically. He was adopted by Chief Jongantaba Dalindyebo, the acting regent of the Thembu people, a gesture done as a favor to Mandela's father, who, years earlier, had recommended Jongantaba be made chief. Mandela subsequently left the carefree life he knew in Kunu, fearing that he would never see his village again. He traveled by motorcar to Kakewini, the provincial capital of Thembuland, to the chief's royal residence. Though he had not forgotten his beloved village of Kunu, he quickly adapted to the new, more sophisticated surroundings of Kakewini. Mandela was given the same status and responsibilities as the regent's two other children, his son and oldest child, Justice, and daughter Nomafu. Mandela took classes in a one-room school next to the palace, studying English, Xhosa, history and geography. It was during this period that Mandela developed an interest in African history, from elder chiefs who came to the Great Palace on official business. He learned how the African people had lived in relative peace until the coming of the white people. According to the elders, the children of South Africa had previously lived as brothers, but white men had shattered this fellowship. While black men shared their land, air and water with white people, white men took all of these things for themselves. University life. Under the guardianship of Regent Jongantaba, Mandela was groomed to assume high office, not as a chief, but a counselor to one. As Thembu royalty, Mandela attended a Wesleyan mission school, the Clarkberry Boarding Institute and Wesleyan College, where, he would later state, he achieved academic success through plain hard work. He also excelled at track and boxing. Mandela was initially mocked as a country boy by his Wesleyan classmates, but eventually became friends with several students, including Mathna, his first female friend. In 1939, Mandela enrolled at the University of Fort Hare, the only residential center of higher learning for black people in South Africa at the time. Fort Hare was considered Africa's equivalent of Harvard, drawing scholars from all parts of sub-Saharan Africa. In his first year at the university, Mandela took the required courses, but focused on Roman Dutch law to prepare for a career in civil service as an interpreter or clerk, regarded as the best profession that a black man could obtain at the time. In his second year at Fort Hare, Mandela was elected to the Student Representative Council. For some time, students had been dissatisfied with the food and lack of power held by the SRC. During this election, a majority of students voted boycott unless their demands were met. Aligning with the student majority, Mandela resigned from his position. Seeing this as an act of insubordination, The university expelled Mandela for the rest of the year and gave him an ultimatum: he could return to the school if he agreed to serve on the SRC. When Mandela returned home, the regent was furious, telling him unequivocally that he would have to recant his decision and go back to school in the fall. A few weeks after Mandela returned home, Regent Jongintaba announced that he had arranged a marriage for his adopted son. The regent wanted to make sure that Mandela's life was properly planned, and the arrangement was within his right, as tribal custom dictated. Shocked by the news, feeling trapped and believing that he had no other option than to follow this recent order, Mandela ran away from home. He settled in Johannesburg, where he worked a variety of jobs, including as a guard and a clerk, while completing his bachelor's degree via correspondence courses. He then enrolled at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg to study law. Political awakening. When Mandela was 16, it was time for him to partake in the traditional African circumcision ritual to mark his entrance into manhood. The ceremony of circumcision was not just a surgical procedure, but an elaborate ritual in preparation for manhood. In African tradition, an uncircumcised man cannot inherit his father's wealth, marry, or officiate at tribal rituals. Mandela participated in the ceremony with 25 other boys. He welcomed the opportunity to partake in his people's customs and felt ready to make the transition from boyhood to manhood. His mood shifted during the proceedings, however, when Chief Malijkili, the main speaker at the ceremony, spoke sadly of the young men, explaining that they were enslaved in their own country. Because their land was controlled by white men, they would never have the power to govern themselves, the chief said. He went on to lament that the promise of the young men would be squandered as they struggled to make a living and perform mindless chores for white men. Mandela would later say that while the chief's words didn't make total sense to him at the time, they would eventually formulate his resolve for an independent South Africa. Anti-apartheid movement. Mandela soon became actively involved in the anti-apartheid movement, joining the African National Congress in 1942. Within the ANC, a small group of young Africans banded together, calling themselves the African National Congress Youth League. Their goal was to transform the ANC into a mass grassroots movement, deriving strength from millions of rural peasants and working people who had no voice under the current regime. Specifically, the group believed that the ANC's old tactics of polite petitioning were ineffective. In 1949, the ANC officially adopted the Youth League's methods of boycott, strike, civil disobedience and non-cooperation, with policy goals of full citizenship, redistribution of land, trade union rights, and free and compulsory education for all children. For 20 years, Mandela directed peaceful, nonviolent acts of defiance against the South African government and its racist policies, including the 1952 Defiance Campaign and the 1955 Congress of the People. He founded the law firm Mandela and Tambo, partnering with Oliver Tambo, a brilliant student he'd met while attending Fort Hare. The law firm provided free and low-cost legal counsel to unrepresented black people. In 1956, Mandela and 150 others were arrested and charged with treason for their political advocacy. They were eventually acquitted. Meanwhile, the ANC was being challenged by Africanists, a new breed of black activists who believed that the pacifist method of the ANC was ineffective. Africanists soon broke away to form the Pan-Africanist Congress, which negatively affected the ANC. By 1959, the movement had lost much of its militant support. Wife and children. Mandela was married 3 times and had 6 children. He wed his first wife, Evelyn Toko Mace, in 1944. The couple had 4 children together: Madiba Theme-Beckel B. 1964, Mkatho D. 2005, Makaziwe D. 1948 at 9 months old, and Maki. The couple divorced in 1957. In 1958, Mandela wed Winnie Madikizela. The couple had 2 daughters together: Zanani, Argentina's South African ambassador, and Zinzizwa, South African ambassador to Denmark, before separating in 1996.